Hello there. You could argue that, couldn't you? Which again is why it's not a huge problem, but it's still there nonetheless. Okay, so now we're at I'm at the bit where they're around the table in Anakin's home for this longer sequence, which I do like, by the way, even though like George said, it wasn't his favourite thing. It was basically a big exposition dump. But I do enjoy the scene. It's good for just like a little slow character scene that just explores some of the traits of our main characters. It takes the time to stop and just sort of not worry about the plot too much, not worry too much about the action or anything. It's just sort of a good little scene that sets up
definitely
quite a lot
solid
for the rest of for the movie and for the saga itself. It's a really important scene.
And that's what I sort of liked about George Lucas's Star Wars is something is seemingly insignificant about them sitting at the table actually means a lot to the character development and the story that is about to proceed.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest gripes, I have with people who criticize these movies, because they go, oh, it's a boring scene of people sitting around a table, or oh, it's a boring scene of politics or whatever. But those scenes are really important and interesting and a huge deal with the story, that to say, oh, it's boring and just sort of skip over it when you watch it is stupid in my mind.
And then people will, of course, propose the argument that, well, these movies shouldn't be that complex because they're made for 12-year-old children, as George Lucas said himself. But George Lucas also said that he likes to respect the intellect of children. Absolutely. And he doesn't want to talk down to them. Yeah, so he wanted to create a movie where, exactly, he wanted to respect the next generation of children he was making the movie for.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, okay. And then we've got the chip that blows up slaves. I'd forgotten about that.
Me too.
So we don't actually know whether that exists, because we never see that deactivated or taken out or anything of either him or his mother. As to whether, it wouldn't do that because they were either sold or freed, they didn't run away, is a possibility. But I would question.
I think it's actually.
I would assume that it's not even a thing. I would assume it's just essentially there as a scare tactic to keep them in line.
It probably is a scare tactic, but on the alternative side where it could be real, I think it's a good justification for why, even if it is a scare tactic, I think it's a good justification for why Qui-Gon doesn't basically just tell Watto to screw off and takes both Anakin and his mother when Anakin wants Shmi to come with them. I think it's a good, it's kind of a good plot protector for what happens when deciding who leaves Tatooine.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe a little bit more could be done with it, because after this scene it's basically like never mentioned again, and its relevance, apart from like what you've just said, is never really important again. So maybe whether something could have been made a little bit more of to do with that, possibly. Like there could have maybe been a scene like when Anakin's freed that Watto, like, I don't know, deactivates it or something, or takes it out, or whatever happens. I don't know, it's a possibility.
I also
Uh,
like the banter between Anakin and Qui-Gon, um,
yeah,
about the Jedi.
and yeah, and I like Jar Jar with his tongue, uh, eating the food. And of course, when Qui-Gon's talking about the Jedi reflexes, and catches his tongue, I think it's just staged
Do
very
not do
very
that
well. It's
again.
shot very well, and it's funny as well.
Yeah,
So when Anakin says like, for pod racing, like, I'm the only human who can do it, I would assume that that's not the case. I would assume there are humans that can do it, but that just he doesn't know about them. He's again, I think it shows some of his arrogance again, which leads on into the other two films.
I think it
Um,
exactly. I think it shows his arrogance, and I think it also shows that maybe it kind of helps hint to Qui-Gon that this boy might be force sensitive,
hmm,
because you would think that a human boy who can pod race might have something gifted about
yeah,
him,
absolutely.
especially if, in his words, no one else can do it
Then
except
there's
him.
clearly something special about this boy that you've just met. That if he can do this thing that nobody else can, there's got to be something about him of interest. And the no one can kill a Jedi. Great bit of foreshadowing for the end of the film.
Yeah, especially since he says, "I wish that were so."
So yeah, it's, watching that scene back once you know that he does die at the end is kind of heartbreaking. Like in the way that he says it.
This is
Uh,
completely off topic, but I can't hold my tongue from saying it. I can't believe we're getting a Cassian Andor series when we could get something as cool as like a Dooku training Qui-Gon series.
yeah, I totally agree. I don't see the point in the Cassian series. Nobody is particularly that interested in his character to begin with. It seems a really odd choice. My assumption is that they probably put it on the board, very shortly, either before or after Rogue One came out, and it's just been sat there ever since. But there's so much more that I'd rather see explored. Um, I mean, people have been starting to talk about oversaturation of prequel content. What with Clone Wars, what with uh, like all this other stuff surrounding the prequels, games, and all sorts, Fallen Order, etc. But honestly, it's just such a vast era to explore that there's so much that can be explored that hasn't yet. Whereas I think pretty much everything that you really, really want to explore in the OT era like has been done now. Um, but there's so much more, especially to do with the Force and the Jedi, and the dark side and stuff like that during this prequel era. I think there's so much potential there, but they're just not capitalizing on it.
Well, in relation to that, I actually have a different view on it. First
Ooh.
of all, they've sort of proven that they can't develop their own
Hmm.
um, congruent timeline. They
Well,
can't
yeah.
create a new era
Hmm.
and keep the interest of fans. So they would have to resort to old content. And from my point of view, I actually thought for a while there the OT was being saturated with
Hmm.
Rebels and Rogue One,
Yeah.
and um, then Squadrons coming out,
Yeah, yeah, and Battlefront 2, um, the story mode from that.
Battlefront 1
Yeah,
as well.
and yeah, because that's totally original trilogy, wasn't it? So yeah, I think they've basically milked what they can out of the originals now. So now, yeah, you're probably right. They're probably just going to move on to other parts of the saga that they can then milk from now on. The prequels seems to be probably the way they're going to go because they've realised that people do actually like the prequels after they ignored them for so long, and that's where
Exactly. I
the
think it's
money
their
lies.
turn.
And I think that's probably signified by the Kenobi series, that they clearly are tapping into that Obi-Wan sort of fandom, if you like, which I'm worried about because I don't want them to mess it up, and I'm sure they will. And again, that's another reason why I don't want to
Like,
see any more prequel content, because it means so much to me, and I don't want to see it retconned or ruined in any way.
oh, I couldn't bear to watch it go down in
No,
flames in
no,
front of my own eyes.
absolutely. I can just imagine they do some series or whatever set during the prequels, and they go in and they deliberately sort of try and recontextualize what's happening in the prequels to fit their own story. And no, I don't want it.
I've I've already had to grit my teeth at a ton of decisions they've made surrounding the OT because
Mm,
I'm I'm kind of a unique fan, I would say, in terms of my perspective on how much I enjoy the original six films. I like all of them sort of equally,
mm,
but differently.
yeah, yeah, that's kind of like me,
So
to be honest.
seeing just seeing some of the decisions they made, and then like a comic that came out after T Ross about Luke somehow having a yellow lightsaber to justify how Rey got hers,
Yeah,
it really
it's
makes me cringe.
yeah. I mean, with like the yellow lightsaber, I can totally see that they do exist. The temple guards have them, but why she has one? That's like where the problem lies. Really,
Or
it's
was
not
she even
necessary.
got it?
Exactly, it's not like the fact that it exists verbatim in the story in the saga within the universe. But it's just the why she has it, where she got it. That's where the problem lies. Again, it's the same as reason as why I don't particularly want them to go and do a load of Old Republic stuff either, because I don't even have a particularly big affinity for the Old Republic. I've only played like half of the first KOTOR game, and that's really all I have knowledge-wise in terms of um, the Old Republic and the cinematics. So I never really got into it, especially in Legends. But even with that limited knowledge, I still really like the concept of it, and I like the characters that
Exactly. There's so much potential
there's so
there.
much potential there. But I know that if they try and tackle it, it won't be good. Which is why
Yeah.
I really want to see it, but I don't want to see it now. I'd rather if they are
Yeah,
if
you just kind of
you kind of want to wait for Disney to finally give up on the franchise or whatever, or sell it on or whatever, um, and only once they're no
got
longer
clean to go.
involved, yeah, that's when some of these things might start to become appealing again to watch.
I'm still holding on to hope for the Mandalorian.
Yeah, I'm still holding on to hope. It is only the first series that we've got. It's got potential as long as it fixes a few key things. I mean, a lot of people, like when the Clone Wars came out, thought, the first series of that was pretty poor, but I mean, look what it grew into. So I'm not going to go, the first series of Mandalorian was not very good, therefore the whole series will be bad. I still have some hope for it, but with what we're hearing from rumors about like bringing characters back and all that sort of side of stuff, that's making me very skeptical about the future of it still.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
So we
right.
kind of got off topic, but
We
I know
did.
exactly where we're at.
Yeah, we're getting towards the end of that scene with the table, which is a good, and I like how Shmi Um, says that like she doesn't like Anakin racing the pods, and it shows that she really does care about him. And it shows that they really have a very close relationship, mother and son. That really Shmi is probably the only person in his life who who cares for him and who he sort of cares for. So it just goes to show that like in episode 2, the lengths he would go to save his mother from death. I think it builds it up really, really well.
It also is a good it's a good reason for him to begin his fall to the dark side.
Yeah, absolutely.
So are we at the part where the storm has passed and
Yeah,
Padme is questioning
that's right.
Qui-Gon?
Yeah, and at this point we can clearly tell that Qui-Gon knows she's the queen. So whether whether he knows exactly when she first comes out with them from the ship is debatable about whether he does actually know then. But here at this point, he definitely knows.
I'm pretty sure even 9-year-old me knew.
Yeah. Queen doesn't need to know. So then, so Qui-Gon barters, was it his ship, for the race? Is that right?
I think so.
For the entry
and then
fee to the race, yeah, because he hasn't got any credits. So that is quite a big risk, Qui-Gon, that you're taking there. But he has his faith that all of this will essentially go the way he thinks. That the Force is behind this. So from his point of view, he's doing something that isn't that risky, but could be considered risky from people looking in who aren't him.
it's almost weird because I heard, of course, Thor Skywalker, you obviously watch his channel.
Yeah.
He was breaking down how Luke's confidence in the scene in Return of the Jedi carries the plot throughout that sequence when there seems to not even really be a specified plan. And I could debate about that all day, but my point is, it is interesting how Qui-Gon kind of carries the same attitude throughout this sequence, where his confidence in Anakin and what is going to happen almost reassures you as an audience member watching the movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think I don't know which like Luke's plan had a lot of steps that could very easily go wrong. It relied on a lot of stuff being left up to chance. That like sending in R2 with the lightsabers, he then doesn't have any protection, and then hoping that R2 will then be in a place close to him if he's captured or in need of assistance or whatever. And all of this, there's a lot of stuff that could go wrong with that. And there's a lot of stuff that could go wrong here. But I would say that with Qui-Gon's affinity for the Force and the fact that although it's still fairly simple what's got to happen, there's fewer steps.
Yeah.
And the fact that all that's really got to happen is this kid's got to win a race. With the Force guiding Anakin essentially, and sort of dictating almost what's happening, I think that's a bit more plausible than the Force potentially helping all of those things in Jabba's palace and the Sarlacc to happen. So I'd say this risky plan does make more sense than Luke's risky plan.
I think both plans are somewhat justifiable because they're both extremely flexible. If you really look at the intricacies of the details of the plans,
Yeah.
because in both plans, in case something goes wrong, Luke and Qui-Gon both obviously have a worst case scenario
Hmm.
plan to carry out,
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
that they can carry out.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, so so Anakin's never finished a race that he's um, been in, which um, I mean, I guess it's a good part of the story about Anakin, finally succeeding, um, probably through the Force being on his side at this point in time. Um, where are we?
What on Qui-Gon are
Yeah, I don't
talking?
I don't know how Watto knows. Like Qui-Gon says, oh, he recently acquired a pod racer. I don't know if that raises a red flag to Watto, because this guy's only been here like a day. Um, so whether he assumes Qui-Gon has just bought a pod racer or what.
Well,
Um,
I think Watto acknowledges it right here. He says, "I hope you didn't kill anyone I know for it."
oh yeah, okay, yeah. To be fair, I didn't get to that bit yet.
Oh
Oh
yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah. He's just
no, it's no problem.
yeah. All right, fair enough. Because Qui-Gon essentially gives him an offer that Watto essentially can't refuse. He basically offers him a scenario in where Watto wins both ways, even though really it's Qui-Gon who wins, which is a great way of sort of taking in Watto for his gambling. He clearly gambles a lot. He has his chance cube on him at all times and stuff. So it's clearly Qui-Gon's way of sort of trying to manipulate Watto into taking this deal by offering him a deal that he can't refuse. And then so they make the deal, and then and then we get Obi-Wan again. He's essentially saying, I hope this plan you have works. So he clearly has his doubts, um, which is one of the things I like in that Obi-Wan's relationship to Qui-Gon. He's a bit more skeptical. He's a bit more brash in his relationship with Qui-Gon in terms of being a Padawan. Is definitely very reminiscent of how Anakin um, treats Obi-Wan when he's his master. And I think that's a good sort of parallel to draw.
Definitely,
Mm.
no problem.
So yeah,
And then doesn't Qui-Gon say, "There's something about this boy"?
yeah. Um, but he just doesn't know what yet. But he wants to find out. Oh, and then he must talk to Shmi about like who Anakin is and his father, um, and the sort of the fact that there is no father. So Anakin is essentially, we assume, born of the Force. That I think he says later on, doesn't he, that it's possible he could have been conceived by the midichlorians, um, which is always open to interpretation, particularly before the other prequels hadn't come out. Um, but I don't know. I think I asked on the podcast last time. I can't remember whether I got a straight answer or not. That in Revenge of the Sith, you've got the opera scene, and Palpatine's clearly sort of telling him the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise, and clearly looks over at him when he says he could manipulate midichlorians to create life. So from that scene, I don't know about what happens in like Legends or whatever, but from that scene, are we?
Well, yeah, there was the comic.
Yeah, the book Plagueis and stuff. Is that supposed to insinuate that Plagueis and Palpatine were the ones who were meddling with the Force and essentially created Anakin, or are we, or is that kind of like a misdirection, and we're supposed to assume that it was just the Force itself and they had nothing to do with it?
I think that's one of those things where the plot isn't necessarily broken by it. So
No,
I'm pretty sure
absolutely.
it's left up to interpretation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the mystery is more important, I would say, than getting straight answers on that. Which is why I like that scene in the opera, because it is quite open-ended. It is quite. It still leaves things unexplained. It's subtle. It doesn't fully explain anything, but it just sort of might give you enough to sort of go, huh, I wonder. I wonder if that's
Yeah, and it's
how
sort of
that happened.
ominous
Yeah,
of what might have happened.
but Lucas never like explains verbatim why Anakin is an immaculate conception or whatever. So yeah,
I think
yeah,
in context to this movie, though,
mm,
with people maybe could be asking, well, why is Qui-Gon insinuating that Anakin could possibly become this chosen one or a Jedi in general? And
hmm,
I think we've been given enough evidence at this point to
yeah,
not only know that Qui-Gon is very heavily in tune with the will of the Force,
hmm,
and he's trying his best to listen to it at this moment. And Anakin has also shown a plethora of abilities that are unnatural.
yeah, yeah. Um, well, yeah, absolutely. And then I do like the conversation with that Qui-Gon has with Shmi. It's again a good sort of slow, sort of more character driven sequence. And the thing about he can see things before they happen. He must have Jedi reflexes. Um, Obviously, first of all, foreshadows why he's so good at pod racing and all of that sort of stuff. Um, but also why he's such a powerful Jedi later in life, and the midichlorians that he has, the huge count of midichlorians, obviously counts towards that, um, and explains why he has such an affinity for it. So, and then what's after this scene?
I think
Oh, it's
Anakin is
yeah, it's him
with
showing off
all of
his.
his other friends.
That's right, he's showing off his pod racer to his friends. Um, and he does give off that sort of air of like he's a 9-year-old kid who's got a new bike, and he's showing it off to the kids in the neighborhood, um, which is something that somebody of that age would be like. So, and also the fact that he's still kind of,
Exactly.
even though they're his friends, like he's still kind of downtrodden by them. Like no way you built this. You wouldn't last a second. You know. They still talk down, which again is why I assume he has very few friends. Where he obviously is friends with this Kitster boy, but that's about it. That's about the only real friend he has of his own age, which I guess is also why he hits it off with Padme so well right at the beginning, because she's someone who actually kind of sees the good in Anakin, and doesn't make fun of him. She's just a nice person that he doesn't really meet very often.
Yeah, I think people fail to consider all the aspects of Anakin's life
Mm,
and how they correlate to the decisions he makes
yeah,
in the future.
absolutely. Um, and then we've got Jar Jar going numb in the energy binders, which I kind of like. I think that's kind of funny. And I like the fact that it's
Well,
Padme who like helps Jar Jar out of all of the people there. Like she's the queen of Naboo, and she's there helping a Gungan get his hand out of an engine. She's sort of learning what it's like to not be royalty. She's learning what it's like, for normal people. She's interacting with normal people. She's helping out essentially a species who her people have been at odds with for probably a long, long time. I think it's like it says a lot about the characters without really having to say anything. It shows how Padme is growing as a character, growing more used to new situations, and like she's no longer just the queen. Like she's learning. She's growing and learning as a person.
Yeah,
Which is one of the
it
reasons.
started to become a
Yeah.
lot more philosophical
Mm.
rather than her character just being so simplistic.
Yeah. And she clearly doesn't really have a problem with Jar Jar. She's helping him out, which I assume is one of the reasons why she picks Jar Jar to sort of. Does she pick Jar Jar to be the representative from Naboo? I assume she does if she's the senator. But it shows.
I'm pretty sure she does.
Yeah, but it shows that they clearly. I mean, in this scene, they clearly. It begins a connection between the two. So him being the representative and her being the senator would make total sense, especially if she like mentors him, in the ways of politics. Jar Jar's by far the most logical person to choose to be essentially the ambassador of the Gungans. I mean, how many Gungans do we really think have been this far out from Naboo? Experienced this much in the galaxy. I think I was talking to somebody through DMs not that long ago about Jar Jar, and brought up a lot of this. And I mean, this guy didn't like Jar Jar, but he totally agreed with what I was saying. That of all of the Gungans, Jar Jar is clearly the most. Although he's like a bumbling sort of, he's not too bright. He's kind of like he's got the most experience. He's the one who's been outside of Naboo. He knows what the world is like now. He's been to the capital of the galaxy. He's been to Coruscant. He's met the Chancellor essentially. What better person is there to sort of send off into the world to deal your Gungan politics than this guy?
And you also know that he has what's best for his people in mind all the time because
Yeah, he's not
thanks
corruptible,
to his
really. Well,
no, he's fairly innocent.
Yeah, exactly. He doesn't have any sort of like ulterior motives or anything like that. He's just doing he's innocent. He's doing what is the best for him and his people, and that's what he has at heart. Okay, where are we next? Get a little bit more banter from R2 and 3PO, which is nice. And then Anakin tests out his pod racer. And I like the look that his mum gives, where she's sort of like kind of happy and kind of sad at the same time, knowing that her son has succeeded in what he wanted to do, but she's clearly very worried about what he's about to do.
I think she's also kind of sad because she might be able to somewhat sense that he'll be leaving her soon, one way or another. He'll either die in the race or he'll be gone from Tatooine.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and then we've got midichlorians coming up, I think, with Qui-Gon taking taking Anakin's blood sample, which obviously are infamous for people hating, because they supposedly break the Force. They make it supposedly quantifiable and grounded in science or whatever, none of which is the case. And I think pretty much all of the arguments that are levied at midichlorians are pretty much invalid, watching the saga. And I do like how Qui-Gon explains it in the Clone Wars, that the midichlorians are essentially like a conduit that allows the cosmic force to connect with or speak to the living force that resides within living beings. I think that's a really sort of nice explanation that he gives. I can't remember his exact wording, but I remember it being very good. So like people think that the midichlorians are like little creatures that live inside you that have the force, which is why you have the Force, um, which I, I mean, I'm going by just, I'm not going by any legends or anything, or I'm just sort of going by what I'm interpreting from the scenes. Um, but I always got that they were cells within you that, well, like microorganisms that kind of just attracted the Force, and like it's not that if you have more midichlorians you are more Force sensitive or anything like that. I almost see it as like the other way round, that like the more Force sensitive you are, the more midichlorians you almost sort of like draw to you that can sort of do you know what I mean? I'm kind of
Yeah,
rambling a bit here.
yeah, I know
Yeah,
what you mean.
yeah. Um, so yeah, I've never seen the problem with them. I can see why people would have problems with them, but like we've said before, that a lot of these problems are pretty invalid when you look at them from the bigger picture. Um,
Well, and also I heard Thor explain it as he thought of midichlorians kind of as, well, if you have more and you're more force sensitive, it's not necessarily that everything becomes easier or you automatically have a higher potential. He said to think of it as like a door that is slightly open for some people, it's
mm,
completely closed for other people, or completely swung open for very lucky people.
mm.
And I think that's a good explanation of how it
Yeah,
works.
I
It's
like that
kind of just,
explanation. That's a really good explanation. I like that.
yeah, like the accessibility of
Mm,
the force
yeah,
is varied between your attraction with midichlorians.
absolutely. Yeah. Uh,
I think it's a perfect explanation for the force. Otherwise, I feel like there might be a little too many questions left unanswered about it.
yeah, I think especially since like in the original trilogy, Luke talks about like the Force is strong in my family, so that raises questions about why does it sort of why is it attracted to bloodlines essentially? If the original trilogy is telling us, that the Force is in everything from the trees to the rocks, everything has the Force, it binds everything together, then why does it have an affinity for certain people, certain bloodlines? I think this explains that perfectly almost.
And this might sound sort of like a weird analogy, but you've seen the 2010 movie Avatar, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, um, do you remember the trees in that movie? How the Avatar could, um, they could basically like connect with it, and it wasn't tangible, but
Mm,
they could almost draw power or hear the
yeah, that's
voices
right. Yeah.
of their
Mm,
ancestors through it.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
similar to how I view midichlorians, where it's almost like a spirit or an essence that can be found within
Mm,
certain things, and it
yeah.
can reside tangibly, but it's not entirely tangible.
Yeah. I
It
like to.
can't be like
Yeah.
drawn out of something.
I think Qui-Gon describes them as like microorganisms that live inside your cells. But I think there's a bit more to them than that. They're not just, you know, creatures. I think there's something, clearly very mystical and magical about these tiny microbes that allows all of this to happen, There's something spiritual probably about them.
Definitely.
Hmm. And then, okay, so he sends it off to Obi-Wan. Um, Obi-Wan checks it. So he's over 20,000. That's higher than any known Jedi, and including Yoda. Um, which obviously is pretty high, and very unusual for, I assume, a young boy like this. Um, and it does obviously the fact that he has such a huge midichlorian count, that he's so um, strong with the Force. Obviously goes on to help in the next two films with how powerful he is. And he's a
I'm really dying for a count on Ray.
It's over 50,000. uh, I wonder if they'll actually do that one day, and give us. No, they won't, will they? They won't bother with that.
No,
They're done with all that.
they don't even understand how lightsabers work. So I
No,
doubt
no, I'm not gonna.
midichlorians are in their realm of understanding.
Well, talking about that, that's one thing I want to do. I want to go back and rewatch some of the original trilogy because apparently, even in the original trilogy, Luke uses both buttons to ignite the lightsaber. But I want to see whether that's intentional or whether that's just like an editing mistake, sort of thing. So before I sort of make actual arguments about that with people, I want to go back and double check some of that.
Yeah, definitely fact checking would be optimal.
Yeah, because I don't want to start sort of talking about it and then find, that's not the case. I'd rather, be more informed. Anyway, that's off topic, really.
So are we at the part?
We are just at Darth Maul's entrance now.
His ship is so cool.
Oh, it's such a cool ship. I'm sad that we never got to see it again in the rest of the films because it was such a cool ship. So he lands. He sends out his probes, I think. Also, I love the music. It's like the sort of really slow, gentle choral version of the Duel of Fates. It's haunting. So he looks around with his binoculars. He sees the settlement, I assume, that he's tracked them to. We don't know how he's tracked them, so... I mean, to be honest, we don't know how tracking really works in the Star Wars universe anyway, without a tracking beacon. So I've got nothing for that, I'm afraid, really. Because Palpatine.
Yeah, I think.
Unless the, because they pick up. No, wait. When they pick up the message from Sio Bibble, is that when they're on the planet? Yeah, that's when they're on the planet, isn't it?
Yeah.
So unless
Do you think they could have traced it then?
They could have traced it then if they answered the call. Even though Obi-Wan says send no reply, maybe by essentially picking up the phone and answering it kind of thing. Maybe that would have given the Trade Federation or whoever a way to track it and track to where they are. But none of that is in the film. So I think I would say that is valid criticism, in that we don't know how Maul tracks them there. But again, like a lot of these, it can be explained, but it just requires...
I think out of all the ones we've noticed, this is probably the most unexplainable one.
Yeah.
There's obviously stories that can be written about it to clearly show what's happening.
Yeah,
or
but I think too much
debates
work
to be
really
made.
has to be done for it to not be considered, a problem. Because really, in the film, we are given nothing other than speculation as to how he's tracked them. So you can come up with a fan fiction essentially of like how he tracked them or what it was that he tracked them with, all of this, but really none of that is given, to be honest. So that, I think, is going to go down as a potential problem.
Yeah, I think that's probably a legitimate criticism, because we can't... I think a rule is we can't use anything that's not directly in the film, especially if it's not really hinted at.
We can't use third-party material to justify parts of the film. We can use inference and stuff like that you could just get from just watching the film, but trying to use third-party media or whatever to explain stuff, no, that's a no-go. I mean, there may well be a comic book out there that explores how he tracked them, but we just can't use it.
I mean, It's a I'm just saying that personally, I prefer no explanation over them using a knockoff holocron to track something.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We don't talk about that. Um, okay, so he sends off his probes, which is good. He sends off like 3 probes out into the desert, and we do see a couple of them later, like searching for them. Okay, so I think we're up towards the pod race now. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got the hangar, the like the pits. Um, so Qui-Gon here is about to barter the pod for Anakin, or Anakin and his mother initially. So I don't really see any problems here. Qui-Gon,
No, he's basically just manipulating
yeah,
Watto.
he's just taking advantage of a local. Um, he does again use the Force to manipulate Watto's uh, dice, which you could say is probably a bit morally questionable. About that's not exactly fair. But then I would probably say that Watto's chance cube probably is like a loaded die anyway, and probably not fair in the
Yeah,
first place.
plus I don't think manipulating someone as morally corrupt as Watto would
Mm.
necessarily be the worst thing,
No.
especially if it's in the name of something good.
Yeah, exactly. Um, so yeah, I'm totally with Qui-Gon, and that's definitely how he would do stuff, especially since we saw him do a similar thing with Boss Nass and Watto earlier. So I'm
I mean,
fine
this
with
guy
him.
owns slaves,
Yeah, exactly.
so
Yeah, I'm totally fine with Qui-Gon doing that. And then see a bit more Sebulba. Um, Watto's betting on Sebulba rather than Anakin, of course. Um, that Sebulba always wins, and that's obviously because he cheats. Um, so it's already an unfair advantage.
I like
So
Jabba's cameo coming up
yeah, yeah, yeah,
to
yeah.
kind of give a nod that he still holds a presence there, even
Yeah,
back to the days of the prequels.
exactly. Yeah, I like that. And I think we would might have mentioned this in our podcast the other day that it's a great bookend for the saga. That it kind of the first film in the saga has Jabba. It starts with Jabba, and then the last film in the saga, until Disney ended with Jabba too. I think that was kind of a good echo across the saga.
Well, it's the constant parallels that are
Yeah.
definitely an aspect that makes Star Wars great, which
Nice.
Dave Filoni pointed out in
Mm,
his interview
It's like
on
poetry
the
and
behind
rhymes.
the sscenes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
I do like the double-headed commentator chaps. I think they've got quite good chemistry. They're kind of funny. They're very much like commentators in our world, but in the Star Wars universe. I don't know whether it kind of doesn't quite fit with Star Wars, but either way, it's great and I love it.
Yeah, it's great.
um,
I think it fits perfectly considering this is somewhat of a sport for them.
yeah, exactly. This is something we've never seen before in Star Wars. This is something totally new. So we can explore some new areas, some new characters here. This is a great opportunity to do that. Um, Ben Quadraneros is up. Uh, and again, the pod, each of the pod races here is so unique in like design, like the pod itself and the drivers. Um, you know,
Once again, adding a ton of different um
sort of like
in my
develop.
opinion,
Mm,
I don't know if this is just my extreme love for the franchise, but
mm,
I could literally become captivated with an entire book series or movie series or whatever on
Mm.
any single one of those species.
Yeah,
I feel
like
like
there's
adding
so
so much
much. Yeah.
species and designs and different things into the mix of Star Wars really opens the doors and makes it feel like there's an entire universe out there.
There's just so much to explore. It just hints at so much out there that is not explored yet. Um, yeah, and all of the pod racers and their drivers, they all feel like they're sort of from different places. Like their designs, you can tell that they probably have different cultures, and they take inspiration from with their paint jobs and the designs from where they come from, and it's so fascinating. Um, oh, and then you get the pit droids who I love and are hilarious. um,
Oh, they're great.
I love the one who gets sucked through the engine and just does like a whee when
Yeah,
he comes out the other
yeah, and he
side.
gives like a thumbs up.
Oh, I love the droids in all of these films. Then let me skip forward a little bit. Um, oh, okay, and then we get the other thing that people gripe about the creature farting in Jar Jar's face, which that doesn't bother me. Um,
Stupider stuff has happened before
yeah,
in more
stupid.
serious movies.
Yeah, exactly. Because like this is still quite a light-hearted movie on the whole. Um, and again, if it bothers you that much, just like skip 2 seconds and you don't have to watch it. It's fine. So it's definitely not a reason to go, oh, this movie's terrible. Jar Jar trod in some poo and smelled a fart. That doesn't make the film.
Yeah,
That doesn't make the film an objectively bad film.
I think we can if my memory serves me right, I think we can completely gloss over almost the entire pod race
Yeah, because
because I
that's
could not find any errors
no,
within that
it's
race
pretty flawless. I think. I'm just trying to sort of
because
think through it.
all the
Uh,
mistakes or slip ups that happen to Anakin's pod and how
mm,
he recovers is completely justified
yeah,
and
absolutely.
explained. You can tell exactly what's happening while it's happening,
Yeah,
and I think it was executed perfectly.
yeah, absolutely. Everything from sort of like the sabotage by Sebulba at the start, to the Tusken Raiders camping out and shooting down at everybody. Everything's all handled extremely well. So,
Even when he goes off the ramp, I
mm,
forgot what lap that was, but he goes off that ramp, which I love to use in Lego
yeah,
Star Wars: The Complete Saga. But he
uh,
um he even like pulls up the exhaust so that it can kind of glide over the canyon,
yeah.
and
I think they were
they
talking about
even
that in the featurettes, weren't they? Where they were sort of saying that these are clearly pods that hover; they don't fly. So that he's gone up this ramp and he's gone up in the air, but it's not going to fly, so it's just going to drop back down. And they think about everything for this. Um, yeah, and it comes off great.
and I don't think there's a problem with the Tusken Raiders shooting at them.
No,
I
that's
think that's part of the essence of the entire planet.
yeah, absolutely. So I'm gonna skip forward just a bit to the end of the pod race because it's pretty good. There we go. Um, so Anakin's won, and then I can't remember which is the bit where he gets told that he's freed. Because the childlike wonder on his face when he hears that is fantastic. Um,
See,
that's
that's one
after
thing I
this bit.
wanted to touch on real quick.
Mm,
It's been a long discussed debate, which I think is completely one sided. Um, there's no way you can give Jake Lloyd a hard time
mm,
about his performance.
no.
He played the part of a young Anakin perfectly. I am so utterly confused why some fans thought that Anakin at 9 years old was going to be some dark
Mm,
badass.
mm,
Like
yeah.
that's what some people
It's because they
imagined.
they went in sort of like expecting him to basically be a young Darth Vader, didn't they? But that's just the opposite of the point that George wanted to get across. It was all about the fact that there's this lovely young boy who got corrupted essentially, and to show that to quote the Dark Knight, ironically, that even someone as good as you could fall. You know, and Jake did an absolutely stellar performance as young Anakin. Never had a problem with it. I don't know whether that's partially because I kind of used to see myself in Anakin because I kind of used to look like him when I was 9 years old. I had the bowl cut and
It's kind of
everything.
funny you say that
Um,
because yeah, I had the exact same look as Anakin too. I
uh, so
saw
yeah,
myself
yeah,
as
yeah. So I saw myself a lot in Anakin. So that's probably why I gravitated towards him so much. Um, Probably more than like someone who watched it as an adult. But I mean, obviously that's a totally personal, subjective thing. But no, Jake did an absolute uh, smashing performance, and did exactly what George wanted him to do. He pulled it off really well.
as Mark Hamill said, he's still upset that people gave him such a hard time
Mm,
because it was ridiculous. But
yeah, for a child
espe-
actor as well, that's awful.
and I really think it was like just above mediocre. I thought it was actually a great performance because I've seen a lot of child actors
Mm,
since I've watched The Phantom Menace for the first time. And of course, not to give them any criticism because like the obvious has been stated, the children playing a
mm,
children's role,
yeah,
they
they don't have as
they
much
are a lot
experience. They're not. It's very rare to find a fantastic child actor. Um,
exactly. And I
so
think
yeah.
Jake Lloyd was probably among some of the best.
Hmm. And likewise, even if if they'd got in an actor to play Anakin and he wasn't, even as good as Jake Lloyd, I'd have still been fine with it, because he is a child actor. What more can you ask of a child? Um, you can't. It's going to be almost impossible to find a child actor who has as much, experience and gravitas and acting ability as like a, you know, seasoned proper actor. Um, so I think for especially Jake to do as well as he did was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree.
Hmm. Yeah, poor Jake Lloyd. And again, I have a problem with like the people who use that as an argument, and again, like for the sequels, that these were people who bullied that the fans bullied Jake Lloyd, essentially into um, like was he in like an institution or something?
Yeah, and then he
Um,
also served some time, I think.
yeah, he did, and almost drove Ahmed Best to suicide. And that they say all this about the fans, and both Jake Lloyd and Ahmed Best have both said that basically it was not the fans, it was the media and how the media represented them, and how like in Jake Lloyd's case it was his friends at school rather than like Star Wars fans. Um, so I think it's a huge misrepresentation of the fans from the time, that I kind of still hold a grudge against the people who did go around saying that. I have quite a big problem with that because it was an awful thing to do.
Me too. It almost in a way, growing up with the prequels made me bond to them even tighter,
Mm,
knowing like because I don't know how like your like society was around your upbringing, but liking Star Wars still was considered a little bit of a nerdy thing to
yes,
do.
it was the same here.
So people were still bullied for
Yeah.
liking Star Wars. And to know that the actors went through some of the same things that an everyday fan might have to experience from expressing their love for the franchise,
Mm,
it almost kind of bonded me a little bit tighter with the prequels
yeah. Mm,
because I felt sort of empathetic for Jake Lloyd and Ahmad Best.
yeah. Yeah. I feel really sorry for him. And I'm glad that Ahmed Best has actually sort of got back into doing stuff again. He's sort of got through it all. He's sort of taken it extremely well. He's now doing that Jedi Youngling training show for Disney Plus. I think he's been really successful since. He's made a really good comeback. I'm really happy for him.
Yeah, definitely. I'm glad. I'm glad it didn't stay that way forever because
Yeah,
it could have
that
easily been that way.
yeah, that would have been just the worst possible outcome, I think. Right, tangent over. Um, what do we get? Okay, so we get Qui-Gon bartering for Anakin. And he threatens Watto with the Hutts, if I remember rightly, which is one of the reasons why Watto lets him take Anakin. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, which again I think is good world building. It sort of lends gravitas to Return of the Jedi. It shows that the Hutts were feared. Um, so yeah, good scene.
Has the part come up yet where a character named Walt, he I think he says something like keep this up, Greedo, and you're gonna come to a bad end. I think it's when Anakin is I think Anakin Greedo,
Is that the
a young
deleted
Greedo
scene?
says Anakin.
I thought that was a deleted
Am I
scene.
remembering a deleted scene?
I don't know. Because I don't think I've seen. People keep talking about that, but I
Well,
don't think I've seen that deleted scene before.
oh yeah. It's the scene where Anakin
Hmm.
he gets in a fight with a young Greedo and
Yeah.
he pushes him down and Qui-Gon has to pull him off from on top of Greedo. And I think there's like a line in there where
Hmm.
it's like a foreshadow to Greedo getting himself into a lot of trouble,
Yeah.
which is a nice
Yeah, I like that.
foreshadow to him
I,
getting shot by
hmm.
Han.
I don't know if there was a
I'm surprised they
reason
took it
why it was
out.
cut. Yeah, I don't know why he cut it out, unless it was just something to do with pacing or whether it wasn't particularly relevant to the story or what. I don't know, but no, that sounds like it would have been a nice scene to have. Hmm. So Qui-Gon has brought the ship parts back, um, brought them back to the ship. He's then got to go back to the city to free Anakin. Uh, this is the bit coming up with where he's like the childish wonder when he's freed is so heartwarming. Qui-Gon's just sort of like, "You're no longer a slave," and he just sort of smiles at him. You just sort of go, "Aww." And then you get
Yeah, where
the
he's like, "Did you
shot
hear
of
that, Mom?"
yeah, and you got the shot of Smee like while Anakin's looking the other way, she kind of like looks slightly down and um, worried for just a second before like when he turns around, she smiles again because she knows that although it's fantastic for him, he's no longer in slavery. It means she no longer has her son. So I wonder if there was a part of Shmi that was almost hoping that he wouldn't be freed, so that she'd still have him around.
Oh, I guarantee there was,
Mm,
especially since she's his
yeah,
mother.
yeah, absolutely. Um, and then, oh, and that's another thing that people tend to bring up is why didn't like Padme go back and free Shmi? like at a later date, or the Jedi, why didn't they go back and free Shmi? And I think in response to that, one of the reasons you could say is that if they did free his mother, he would probably end up living with his mother, and then that would lead to
And he
more
definitely
attachment.
developed too much of
Yeah,
an attachment.
attachment. The whole point of bringing them away so young is so that they don't know their family, so they don't have an attachment to their family. And Anakin's already got like 9 years worth of that, behind him. So bringing his mother probably actually in the long run wouldn't be a good idea, but it's also sort of questionable about not going back to save her.
I think the right
But
move would have been to save her, but not bring her to Coruscant.
I think,
So Anakin could sleep soundly knowing his mother was safe, but
yeah,
at the same time he wouldn't be holding on to the attachment.
yeah, absolutely. And
But then
I think it's good that
you
in
go ahead.
Attack of the Clones that Klieglar's, I mean, he buys her as a slave, doesn't he? But then he essentially frees her and marries her and stuff. So she does get that sort of that liberation. But that it's not quite the way I'm sure Anakin would have wanted it to go. That she was sold by Watto, after Watto promised to like look after Shmi.
Yeah, definitely.
But I wouldn't say that's a problem with the film at all. If anything, I'd say that might be a problem with Attack of the Clones. With Padme not going back at all. But I mean, I don't know how much sway Padme would even have there. So, it'd probably be a futile effort anyway. So he's going off to become a Jedi.
Would you mind if we
Go ahead.
get to the part where he says goodbye to his mom?
Yeah,
Because
I'm gonna skip forward to that bit.
I don't think there's any.
No, I don't think there's any problems in between that. Skipping from, just trying to skip through forward. He says goodbye to 3PO. I like that scene. Here we go.
I'll make sure mom doesn't sell you.
Sell you or anything. It's just such bye. It's just such a sort of anticlimactic goodbye. I love it.
And he's like, sell me.
Oh. So, we're now at the bit with Anakin walking away with Qui-Gon. He's leaving home for what should be like the last time. And he stops and turns around and sees his mum. I like the music, and it's sort of like there's like a tinkle of sort of magic, and then as he turns around, it's that sort of slow, more somber music as he goes back to his mother. Good music direction. Yeah, and this there's nothing wrong with this scene. This scene is brilliant. Pretty much everything about it. Yeah, just great character development for Anakin, and definitely cements how much he cares for his mum and how what lengths he's willing to go and save her in the next film.
If you have the time, if you haven't seen it, there's this edit on YouTube called Chosen One. I just thought I should mention it, and that's kind of how it starts off, and it's like an entire simplified tale of how Anakin became a Jedi, fell, and then redeemed himself.
Oh, that sounds cool. I'll check that out after the stream. Yeah, that sounds interesting. I think I've heard people talk about it before in places. So yeah, I'll check that out. So yeah, great scene. And then after that, so they walk out, they walk back down the alleyway. And then we get the probe returning to Darth Maul, reporting back, and he goes and gets on his speeder bike and heads off. Um, I assume to follow them. Um, it's a big drop he goes down off the cliff very quickly. I will say that. And then we're into the scene where it's Qui-Gon and Anakin running towards
Yeah.
the ship. So yeah, I think the fact that deleted scene is no longer there, although it doesn't really matter overall, I think it would just improve that, because the last time we saw them, just a few minutes, less than a minute ago, they were walking away from his mother, and now they're running towards their ship as if they're being chased. I think there is just like a little skip in continuity there, so I think that scene, I think it's a valid criticism that scene probably should have been in the film.
Or they could have added even a different type of scene to keep
Yeah,
the pacing or whatever
yeah,
intact. Where
just something similar. Um,
yeah, he
yeah,
destroys the tracker droid, and then Maul gets Maul realizes like the signal was lost from
mm,
the droid, and then that's when he goes and finds them
yeah, and
at
that
the location.
wouldn't be very difficult to do, I assume, when they're filming out there. That seems a fairly simple scene to add in. Um, so yeah, I think that would be a fair criticism, but not one that really is overly important or critical of like how the film actually functions.
I think after Qui-Gon and Maul's fight,
Mm,
when he gets on the ship, it's obvious that he is kind of exhausted from what just happened,
mm,
but I think he's also showing a ton of shock
yeah,
that there is a Sith Lord.
well, exactly, because they haven't been around for 1,000 years, and he's just been jumped by one essentially out of nowhere without warning. So yeah, absolutely, I'm sure he'd be in shock. I mean, this is probably the first time he's probably fought a foe with a lightsaber. You know, other than training, even though he's like a Jedi Master. So it's a
Yeah,
test for Qui-Gon as well, if anything.
it's just so weird because
Mm.
in my mind, I would have Qui-Gon beating Maul
Mm.
easily.
Yeah,
At least at the stage Maul was in the Phantom Menace.
yeah, um,
I think a more prepared Qui-Gon versus Maul, let's just say a Maul from Clone Wars versus Qui-Gon,
yeah. I think
would be
yeah,
very interesting.
yeah. I'd like to see that fight. Um, I think the fact that it was essentially a shock, he wasn't expecting it, I think could probably account for a lot of that. That Maul was the one who was chasing down Qui-Gon, and Qui-Gon didn't know. So I'd probably say that might be why he's on the back foot. Um, and the fact that he said take out the Jedi, or whatever he said earlier in the film, and this is what he's done. Again, fine continuity wise. Um, I'm not sure about the choreography. I'd need to like really go in and pause it and slow it down and really analyze it.
I've
If
I've seen the featurettes and
mm,
the training they went through. I have strong confidence that it
yeah,
is almost 100% bulletproof.
yeah,
I
I'm
mean,
sure it would be.
I the guy who was describing the choreography for the prequels, who was brought in to help design everything,
Mm,
he literally treats sword fighting like a game of chess where every
mm.
move can only be played one specific way or someone dies.
Well, that's why Star Wars isn't the same without Nick Gillard, isn't it? I mean, he was the old master at it. He was like the god of sword fighting, of saber fighting, um, which is why the sword fights are so fantastically done. And a lot of people obviously had
Yeah.
problems with them being supposedly too long or too flashy. Um, which on the surface they look like that, but when you actually analyze them, I mean, Shadiversity did a fantastic job doing it, didn't he? Breaking them down. That even they look flashy, they look choreographed, but even when you like analyze them, pretty much every single move is pretty realistic. It has weight, it has action, it has like intent behind it. It's not just sort of clacking two sticks together. And often there's a story to tell through the fighting. No, Nick Gillard does an absolutely fantastic job with all of the fights.
Yeah, 100%. I think one of the best fighting sequences we ever see in any of the Star Wars movies was when Obi-Wan watches Qui-Gon drop to the floor, and you can see him pacing around, with Maul pacing around, kind of with more of a thirst for blood. And then
Yeah,
you see how much quicker Obi-Wan fights that time around
yeah, that
versus
is
previously.
brutal. It's so fast. It's great, great work. And I'm sure we'll get to that. Because I think, yeah, we're definitely over halfway, and I'm pretty sure there's fewer problems later on, so we should be good, I think, for time wise. If not,
Yeah.
we may have to like cut it short and finish it off another time. I don't know. Depends on how far we get
I
through it.
mean,
Because I also don't want you
it's
stopping up too late, you know.
well, it's 6 in the morning for me right now, so I'm in it till the end.
That's all right then. We'll see how it goes. Okay, so Qui-Gon, yeah, we've just got up to the bit where Qui-Gon's jumped in the ship. I also like the fact that they only use one blade in that first fight with Maul, and save the double-bladed. They show off the double blade for the final duel. I think, yeah, that works really well. It's a good,
Yeah, it's
it's a
perfect.
good surprise. Yeah, so like you said, Qui-Gon's definitely out of breath and in shock here. He doesn't even know it's a Sith. He just said it. He doesn't know what it is. It's just it was trained in the Jedi arts. So yeah, he doesn't even know what's just happened.
And then I think they're all
Well,
are they all
Anakin.
just talking right now?
Yeah, so they're all talking. Anakin sort of says, "Nice to meet you, Obi-Wan," sort of thing, which is a nice, sweet introduction. Uh, and then, so if we move on a bit, they leave Tatooine, and we go back to Naboo, and we've got the Viceroy talking to the what role is he the advisor, Sire Bibble, to the Queen, or something like that? One of her courtiers,
I
something like that. Whatever his
I think
role is.
so.
Yeah. Anyway, it's those two talking, and Gunray's trying to put him in a sort of an ultimatum where he's like, "Your people are starving. We want the Queen, essentially." Also, I didn't know that the chap who played Sio Bibble was in Game of Thrones.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
And apparently the Queen, the person who plays the Queen in Episode 3, at like Padme's funeral, she's also in Game of Thrones. I didn't know either of that either.
Really?
Yeah, apparently. Not something I knew before, but it's kind of interesting. Oh, okay. And then we've got the battle droid comes in to announce that his droids are going to start searching the swamps. So this is where the Gungans must leave the cities and go to their forest hideout, which is where we find them later on. I don't know why they are clearing out the swamps, because I don't think their quarrel is with the Gungans. Like if the Gungans had attacked, I could understand it, but they seem to just be going down like to attack the Gungans, like for no, well, not no particular reason, but there doesn't seem to be a reason particularly as to why the Gungans are a threat to them at this point. Um, unless they're searching the swamps for more people from Naboo, but they find the Gungans. I'm not sure. Hmm.
I don't think they say specifically, but I definitely don't think it's
Uh,
a major issue.
no, it's not a major issue. I don't even think it's an issue. I think he just says we're beginning to sweep the swamps or something. Um, so maybe if they're just searching the swamps and they find the Gungans, maybe they're just like, oh, well, we may as well take these prisoner. We've found them, so I guess that's probably fine. And then, okay, so it's Padme and Anakin's scene next, I think. Oh, and Padme opens up the message from her advisor on the ship, where he's saying like, you must contact me. The death toll is catastrophic, which is the message from earlier. Now, if that had been earlier on in the film, then I would have said that could have been how Maul tracked them to Tatooine if she opened that up with nobody's knowledge. But since it happens after that, then that's not really going to answer that. So Padme looks distressed, goes and talks to Anakin, and there's nothing wrong with this scene. It's pretty sweet. He gives her the necklace, which is a great motif throughout the films. And then we get their arrival on Coruscant, I think.